Hello guys, welcome back. We need to beautify our portfolio, our e-commerce website or whatever website we want to show the world. We're going to be going from this to this. Let's dive in. So we have all our elements, even have some emojis. But despite that, it still looks so boring. Look at that. So we need to style it, beautify it, let it pop for the world to ask us what we are offering. We use CSS for beautification. When you're using CSS, you can either use it inline, internal, or external. I want to give my H1 an attribute called style because I'm doing inline styling. So I have to use an attribute called style. As soon as I gave it the inline style, the color changed to red. I want to style the paragraph, but I want to use internal style instead of inline style. For you to do internal style, you go to your head at the top of the page and put style tags so that I can give internal styling. I want my paragraph that has a class of subtitle, a color of green. So I say subtitle green. And as you can see, my color has gone from black to green. The external style is what we have here. We have a separate page where we define all our styles. Then we just tell HTML, go to this page and get all the styles there and use it for this page. And then we define the URL, that is where the style sheet is. So here I have my CSS and it is pretty empty. Also, when you are inline, you are already working on the element, so you don't need to define the elements. But when you are working internal or external, so you pick the identifier, whether it's the element name or the element ID or the element class, you pick the identifier, open curly brackets, you put the attributes that you want to affect. So right now, you want to affect the color of something, that's an attribute. You want to affect its height, its font size, its font weight. You want the transition. Those are attributes of those elements. So you pick the attributes of the style of the element and give it whatever value you want. So you need the identifier, the attribute, and the value. But the beautiful thing about external over internal is that you can use one style sheet to style many HTML pages because it is outside the page. But when you are using the internal, it is restricted to just that HTML page you have. So I will use internal sparingly and inline sparingly. I will be sticking with the external. So let's style this thing one element per time till we have a gorgeous page. We are going to be mostly inside our CSS because we are styling. Everything was moving towards the left. But as soon as I added a text align of center, I am saying that I want to align the text to the center. The text moves to the center. So I'm doing that for the header. If we go down the page, we can see that other elements are still where they are on the left hand side. But the only part that we have moved to the center is the header. When I added padding, let's see what we mean. The green box is the padding. So the padding creates space between the parent and his children. Now we are starting our H1. That's the theme of our page. And then we gave it a font size of 4M. So we can use pixels, that's PX, EM, and REM. EM determines a size based on the parent of the element. So basically we are saying that we want our font size for H1 to be 4 times the size of its parent. When we use EM, we are referring to the parent. When we use REM, we are referring to the root element, which is HTML itself. Right now, we want our H1 to have 4EM, that is 4 times the size of its parent's font size. And then we want it to have a bottom margin of 10 pixels. The orange box is what depicts the margin. Margin is talking about the space between an element and another element. Don't forget that padding is talking about the space between the element and his children, but the margin is talking about the space between an element and another element. So we have margin at the top and we have margin at the bottom. We are asking to have a bottom margin of 10 pixels. There are some elements that come with some default margins, but we are saying that we don't want to use the default margin that is coming for the bottom. of H1, we want to make it 10. If you can see the top is very large, we wanted the bottom to be 10 pixels. So that's why we have used that. We have added text shadow. We want our H1 to have a shadow around it. The first value for the text shadow of 3 pixels is saying, oh, let the shadow go 3% horizontally. Then the next one said, let the shadow go 3% vertically. Then the next element says, don't let it be sharp shadows. Give it some form of blurriness so that it looks like real shadows. We are talking about some form of blurriness to the shadow. It does not look so rough and sharp. Then the last element is the color. We want shadow of black and we want it to have an opacity of 0.3. Because elements have default margins and paddings, we tend to start by saying, take all the elements. That's what star is doing. So our star takes all the elements, then gives it a margin of 0, meaning that don't create space between them and other elements. Give them a padding of 0, meaning don't give the parents and children space either. Let me determine what the spaces will be, whether between or among. People tend to remove the default value so that we can define it the way we want. Also, we tend to use a box sizing of border box. Elements have width, they have height. So border box, make sure you padding plus the margin, when you add everything together, it still stays within the width of the elements. When you use content box, the margin and the padding can overflow the width or height of the elements. So now that we have handled the defaults, then we can continue with styling our elements. Inside our HTML, we have a div inside the body. So we are using the div as a wrapper around all the other elements. And we gave it a class called container. So we are styling it here. We are trying to make sure that no matter what happens, the width of the container does not go beyond 1200 pixels. It can go lower, but it must not go higher. So that helps us to make sure that our page follows a similar style. If we don't put those kind of conditions, when it's on screens larger than 1400, it can become very ugly. So we are saying that no matter how large you are, just stay within 1200 pixels. When we came to our general purpose identifier, which is our star, we use margin of 0. Because we used only one value, we are referring to the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. But in this scenario here, where we are using two values, 0 and auto, first value is talking about the top and the bottom, while the second value is talking about left and right. So we are saying that give it a margin of top and bottom of 0, while you give it a margin of left and right of auto. It makes the space on the left and the right equal. Auto shares the space equally. Then we now give it a padding of 20 pixels, meaning that give it space between it and all its children. So one value is talking about top, bottom, left, right. If we had used padding and two values, the first one will be top, bottom, while the second one will have been left, right. But now we're using just one value, so it means we want 20 pixels all round. The next thing we have styled is our subtitle. Don't forget we gave the paragraph a class of subtitle, and for you to identify class inside your CSS file, you use a dot in front of the name of the class. So the subtitle means a class called subtitle. So we gave the font size of 1.5 em, and then we gave it an opacity, meaning that we don't want you to be full color, we want it to be a little transparent. So this is a 90% opacity, and then we gave it a bottom margin of 20 pixels. Watch as we beautify everything element by element. Now we are making the profile picture child called image. We are making it have a maximum width of 50% of its parents, and we are also making it have a border radius of 50 pixels. Before we added our style, our picture had sharp edges, had sharp corners, but border radius gives it curves. So I wanted it to be circular, that's why I gave it a border radius of 50%. I have a class called profile pic. Then I now went to the class and said, whatever image is inside these elements, that's why I have img and elements, give it these styles of maximum width of 50%, it should not be bigger than 50%, and then border radius of 50%. This page is becoming beautiful as we handle each element. As we put our foundation, our concealer, our lipstick, it's getting gorgeous as we go. Now we are styling the parent of our picture. which is the element that has a class called profile pic. We gave it a width of 200 pixels. We use div to create containers where we can store things. Like you want to show products in an e-commerce website. When you use your div, you can put the pictures, your products inside, just like we're doing here. So you could have an e-commerce website where your items are showing as circles instead of squares. Divs are very flexible. I have a div to store my image, and I give div a width of 200 pixels, a height of 200 pixels. That gives it like a square format. Then I gave the border radius of 50%, so that makes it circular. I gave it a border, that is around it. I want to have an outline, something around it, 5 pixels thick, and I want the border to be white. So that's why I have 5 pixels solid. FFF is saying white. So if you can see, we already have a white outline around our div. Then I gave it a margin of 20 pixels. So that means I want space between it and its neighbors. And then auto, that means we want to share the space equally, as we have said. Then we gave it a background with linear gradient, 45 degree, 2 colors. So what does linear gradient do? We take colors standing side by side, and then we let them flow into themselves, so you can't really see where one starts and where one stops. So we take 2 colors linearly and make them flow into themselves. And then 45 degree I have here is telling me the angle in which to flow the colors. So I'm asking to flow at a 45 degree angle. Sometimes you can say flow from left to right, or top to bottom, or bottom to top. Then we have a display of flex. When you have elements to be displayed flex inside a div, the div takes the elements and make them flow based on the screen size. When you have a display of flex, it can either arrange its children either vertically or horizontally, but we have only one child. So the essence of using flex in this scenario is that we want to make sure that we put the image at the center. Align item center means that the item should be at the vertical center, and then when we say justify content center, we are saying it should be on the horizontal center. Then we gave it box shadow. So if you can see around our div, we have that shadow. So I decided to start with the body, and we are saying that we want it to have a background color linear gradient, and then we have defined a linear gradient. We are giving it a color, so that means every text that is the child of that body will have a color of white. Then we gave it overflow X of hidden. When the children are bigger than the parents, and you give an overflow of hidden, it means that the child will be truncated so that it does not go out of the parents. But with an overflow X, it means that we are trying to ensure that it does not flow horizontally out of the parent. When you have overflow Y, you are saying flow vertically out. But we don't really mind it flowing vertically out because we can scroll down. But if it is flowing horizontally out, it is ugly because the page will be moving of its own volition. So that's why we are using an overflow X of hidden. Then we gave it a font family. So font families help us to determine what kind of font to be used. This thing is getting beautiful. Please work on your page. You need to apply your knowledge to know. When you apply, it tends to sink. So guys, do not forget to like, share with other people that want to make their pages pop, that want to show their creation to the world. And please subscribe so that you can get an alert when the other series of these videos come along. See you some other time. Bye bye.